Michigan is dotted with forests, lakes, and quiet towns, but hidden among these landscapes are houses long forgotten by the living. Some are overgrown with weeds, their windows shattered, and doors hanging off hinges. Yet those who dare enter speak of more than decay. They speak of shadows moving in empty rooms, whispers that crawl along the walls, and cold that bites deeper than winter ever could. These abandoned homes are not just empty, they are haunted. Figures appear in the corners, watching. Footsteps echo in rooms where no one walks. Some say the walls themselves remember tragedies long buried. Tonight, we will explore the top 20 most haunted abandoned houses in Michigan, where the past lingers, and the living are never truly alone. If you heard your name whispered from a darkened doorway, would you step inside, or would you run before the shadows claim you? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe tonight, because the houses we are about to explore are not forgiving to the unprepared. Michigan's abandoned homes carry history, sorrow, and the restless energy of those who never left. Visitors have reported doors opening by themselves, cold drafts brushing past their necks, and lights flickering even without electricity. Some have glimpsed figures standing silently at the top of stairs, staring from broken windows, or walking through walls as if they were always part of the house. Others hear faint cries, laughter, or murmurs echoing in empty rooms. Before we step inside, let me ask you this: if you could see the faces of those trapped between life and death in a forgotten home, would you look, or would you close your eyes and leave? Take a deep breath, stay close, and let us enter the most haunted abandoned houses of Michigan. Willow Creek Manor stands at the edge of a forgotten forest, a grand estate reduced to skeletal remains of its former glory. The roof has caved in, leaving beams exposed to the elements, while ivy crawls across stone walls and through broken windows, reclaiming space once held by wealth and ceremony. The roof has caved in, leaving beams exposed to the elements, while ivy crawls across stone walls and through broken windows, reclaiming space once held by wealth and ceremony. The roof has caved in, leaving beams exposed to the elements, while ivy crawls across stone walls and through broken windows, reclaiming space once held by wealth and ceremony. The front doors hang crooked on rusted hinges, and the gardens have turned wild, tangled with weeds and brambles. The roof has caved in, leaving beams exposed to the elements, while ivy crawls across stone walls and through broken windows, reclaiming space once held by wealth and ceremony. The front doors hang crooked on rusted hinges, and the gardens have turned wild, tangled with weeds and brambles. Even in decay, the manor commands attention, a silent sentinel of history and memory that refuses to be ignored. Inside, the air is heavy with dust and the scent of damp wood. Floors creak underfoot, echoing across empty halls, where ornate wallpaper peels from the walls. Light filters through shattered windows in uneven streams, casting sharp angles and deep shadows that shift with the movement of the sun and the flutter of leaves outside. Visitors often speak of the parlor, where an old piano sits, keys yellowed and dulled with age. At times, faint notes drift through the air, delicate and unbidden, as though someone unseen is coaxing a melody from silent strings. The music is soft, ephemeral, appearing only briefly before vanishing, leaving silence to press back against the walls. It is not loud or threatening, but it creates a sense of intimacy, a momentary connection to something just beyond perception. Shadowy figures have been glimpsed moving through the menorah's halls. They are rarely seen directly, appearing in the periphery, walking slowly along corridors or pausing in doorways, before vanishing into walls or fading with the ambient darkness. Some describe a woman in a long, flowing dress, her movement graceful yet impossible, as though she is tethered to the space by memory alone. Her presence is accompanied by a chill, a subtle drop in temperature that moves unpredictably through the rooms. Cold spots appear and dissipate without warning, lingering in one corner before shifting silently across the manor. They contrast sharply with the otherwise stagnant air, creating awareness of presence and absence simultaneously. Visitors note goosebumps along their arms, a prickle at the back of the neck, and the sensation of being watched even in rooms that appear entirely empty. These phenomena do not harm, but they command attention, heightening perception and encouraging stillness and observation. The manor seems to possess a rhythm of its own. Doors creak as if sighing under their own weight. Loose floorboards shift with imperceptible pressure. And the wind threads itself through broken windows and cracked walls, creating low moans that resonate through the halls. Time feels altered within the space. Minutes can stretch, distorted by the play of light, shadow, and sound. Movement becomes measured, deliberate, as visitors adjust to the menorah's subtle cues and shifts. As the menorah's rhythm continues to unfold, each room carries layers of history. Bedrooms retain fragments of furniture, and fireplaces still bear soot from fires long extinguished. Libraries contain shelves bowed under the weight of books, yellowed and brittle, pages curling in the damp air. Chandeliers sway slightly when touched by drafts, scattering light across the decayed elegance of ceilings and walls. Every detail emphasizes the manor's age, its fragility, and the persistence of memory within the physical structure. The experience of wandering Willow Creek Manor engages multiple senses simultaneously. Sight, sound, and touch interact with intuition and imagination. The movement of shadows, and the shifting cold all combine to create an immersive environment where observation becomes both a challenge and a reward. Even when nothing seems to move, the manor feels alive, a presence that stretches beyond the limitations of ordinary perception. Night brings a different character to the manor. Darkness deepens shadows, amplifies sounds, and magnifies the sense of space. Light sources, whether from flashlights or moonlight through broken windows, create isolated pools of visibility, leaving vast areas in soft, indeterminate darkness. Sounds travel differently, footsteps echoing longer, creaks lingering, and distant drafts stirring loose objects with quiet insistence. The sense of stillness is deceptive, as though the manor waits, patient and attentive, observing the rhythm of each movement. Memory of the manor persists long after departure. Visitors recall the notes of the piano, the fleeting shapes of shadowy figures, and the unpredictable chill that moved through rooms. These impressions remain vivid, returning in quiet moments and dreams, as if the house has imprinted itself upon the observer. Even in daylight, the image of the manor, its ruined elegance and mysterious energy, lingers, shaping perception of space and atmosphere in subtle ways. Willow Creek Manor is more than ruins and timber. It is a living record of history, presence, and perception. A space where architecture, memory, and imagination converge. Each visitor's experience is unique, yet the atmosphere and phenomena are consistent, binding past and present in a quiet, immersive narrative. The manor teaches observation, patience, and respect for spaces that carry weight beyond their visible decay. The estate endures, silent and patient, weathering time and elements alike. Its timber, stone, and vine continue to exist, independent of human presence, yet intertwined with the impressions and experiences of those who enter. Willow Creek Manor remains a destination not only for exploration, but for reflection, inviting awareness of the unseen, the persistent, and the delicate threads of history that linger quietly within its walls, creating an unforgettable journey through memory, atmosphere, and the subtle persistence of life beyond life. Blackwood House sits at the edge of a neglected field, its silhouette jagged against the evening sky. The windows are shattered, edges of glass catching the fading light and reflecting fractured beams into the surrounding overgrown yard. The roof sags slightly, and the paint peels from the walls in long strips, revealing weathered wood beneath. The paint peels from the walls in long strips, revealing weathered wood beneath. The air carries the faint scent of damp earth and decay, mingling with the faint metallic tang of old hinges and rusted locks. Approaching the house, visitors notice a change in the atmosphere. The wind seems to move differently, brushing past in subtle currents that follow and linger. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the broken FAA sectionade, merging with the surrounding trees and undergrowth. Even in the daylight, there is a sense that the house is aware, watching quietly, patient and deliberate in its stillness. Inside, the experience grows more intense. Flickering lights are often reported in rooms long abandoned, casting brief, uneven illumination across broken furniture and peeling wallpaper. Shadows gather in corners, moving independently of the flicker, elongating and shrinking in ways that seem deliberate. The floorboards groan underfoot, yet at times they creak when no one is walking nearby, reinforcing the feeling that the house itself moves subtly with unseen purpose. A man in tattered clothing has been seen pacing silently through the main hall and upper rooms. His appearance is fleeting, blurred at the edges, and he vanishes the moment approached. There is no sound of footsteps, only the suggestion of motion, a ripple in the air that leaves a lingering awareness of his presence. Guests report a sensation of being observed from multiple angles, as if he exists in a space slightly removed from normal perception. The attic holds its own energy. Whispers rise from the space, soft and repetitive, calling names that are unfamiliar yet oddly precise. The voices seem to emerge from the walls themselves, echoing faintly down the stairwell and filling the house with subtle tension. Some visitors feel gentle, invisible hands guiding them through the house. A light touch at the elbow, a subtle shift of weight, or a movement of clothing can steer individuals down hallways or down the stairs. The sensation is never violent, only insistent, creating a combination of unease and fascination. It is as if the house itself wishes to be acknowledged, influencing motion without explicit force. Rooms that were once furnished and lived in now lie in ruins. Tables are overturned, chairs scattered, and walls are marked with years of wear and weathering. The broken glass in windows allows shafts of light or moonlight to scatter unevenly across floors, illuminating dust motes that drift slowly in the air. The interplay of light and shadow gives every corner a sense of depth and motion, as if the house breathes slowly and deliberately around its inhabitants. Sounds behave differently here. Footsteps echo longer than expected. Conversations in one room carry faintly into others, and the creaking of boards or shifting of debris seems amplified. Even the faintest movement of wind through broken windows produces patterns of sound that feel intentional, as though the house records and responds to every intrusion. Visitors often notice their own breathing and movement amplified, heightening awareness and tension. The stairs present a particular focus. Narrow, steep, and lined with railings that groan under even minimal pressure, they convey both fragility and history. Those ascending or descending frequently report the sensation of being gently guided or restrained. Each step carries weight, both physical and psychological, as the house asserts itself subtly through the interaction with the body. The effect is disorienting yet compelling, drawing attention to the structure and energy of the space simultaneously. Even the exterior seems alive. Branches of nearby trees brush against walls and windows, moving with a rhythm that matches the internal sounds of the house. The broken glass reflects passing clouds and light, creating fleeting images that appear to move independently. Every detail, from the sagging roofline to the debris-strewn floors, contributes to a sense that Blackwood House is more than wood and plaster. Visitors leave Blackwood House changed. The flickering lights, silent pacing figure, repetitive whispers, and invisible guidance linger in memory long after the physical presence is left behind. Dreams are often filled with halls, shadows, and the sensation of being watched. The weight of history and unseen attention persists. reinforcing the notion that this house holds both the stories of the past and the energy of every presence that has ever crossed its threshold. Blackwood House endures as it has for decades, its broken windows and sagging walls recording the passage of time and human curiosity. Suspended between decay and observation, between silence and whispered presence. To enter is to step into a space where history, memory, and subtle energy converge. Leaving every visitor with a lasting impression of a place that is alive in ways that defy ordinary perception. And continues to hold those who enter in quiet, inescapable awareness. Ashenfield Cottage sits isolated among overgrown trees, its charred exterior a stark reminder of the fire that consumed it decades ago. Roof beams sag, blackened and brittle, while the walls are streaked with soot that has refused to fade with time. Windows are shattered or missing, and the once pristine garden is now a tangle of weeds and scorched earth. By night, it transforms into a place of subtle unease, where shadows shift in corners and the air carries a weight that is impossible to ignore. Visitors often notice the doorway first. Figures appear within the blackened frames, silhouettes of people whose faces are scorched yet retain a hauntingly human quality. They do not move quickly, yet their presence is undeniable. They seem to watch those who approach, lingering in place like a memory caught between worlds. When someone tries to step closer, the figures vanish, leaving only smoke and the lingering scent of charred wood. Inside, the cottage is heavy with the sensation of the fire's aftermath. Floors creak underfoot, echoing through empty rooms. Visitors report hearing soft cries originating from the kitchen, faint and sorrowful, as if someone is mourning a loss that never ended. Footsteps follow along the hallways, measured and deliberate, yet when explored, the corridors are empty. The space feels alive with history, every corner carrying traces of the lives interrupted by the blaze. Smoke seems to linger in the air even when the house is cold and clear. It curls through hallways and coils around doorframes, faint enough to see only in shafts of light, yet heavy enough to touch the senses. Guests describe a sensation of warmth in some areas and sudden cold in others, as if the cottage itself breathes and reacts to movement. The interplay between light, shadow, and lingering smoke creates a perception of motion where nothing exists. The kitchen is particularly unsettling. Burned cabinets and scorched countertops appear frozen in time. Visitors often hear the softest noises here, the faint scrape of a drawer, a chair moving slightly, or a sigh carried on the still air. Even those who do not see a figure feel a presence pressing just beyond the edge of perception. The echoes are subtle, yet they persist, leaving the impression that someone is close, watching and remembering. Corridors and rooms further inside the cottage carry similar impressions. Doors that were closed are sometimes found slightly ajar. Floors creak with steps that do not match the visitor's pace. Shadows stretch along the walls, bending and twisting in ways that feel intentional. Every movement is accompanied by a sense that the cottage is aware, acknowledging each intruder without direct contact. The history of Ashenfield Cottage enhances the atmosphere. Built decades before the fire, it was once home to a family whose lives were abruptly ended or altered by the blaze. The tragedy has left a mark, and those who enter cannot help but feel its resonance. Stories passed down by locals speak of figures seen through the smoke, their faces scarred but recognizably human, wandering hallways and doorways as if retracing the moments before disaster struck. Visitors often attempt to rationalize the experiences. Creaking floors, shifting shadows, and lingering smoke could be explained by age, weather, or imagination. Yet patterns persist across decades of accounts. Figures in doorways, cries from the kitchen, footsteps in empty hallways, and smoke that refuses to dissipate form a consistent narrative. Even skeptics acknowledge that Ashenfield Cottage evokes a feeling that transcends ordinary explanation. Light inside the cottage behaves unpredictably. Sunlight filtering through broken windows creates shifting patterns along walls and floors. Shadows seem to move independently, sometimes converging into shapes that resemble human form. Smoke catches the light, creating illusions of depth and presence, further amplifying the sensation that the cottage is occupied by something more than memory alone. Guests who linger near the front of the house report seeing silhouettes move along the exterior walls, disappearing when approached. The scorched remains of the structure carry echoes of motion, and even from a distance, the house seems to watch. The surrounding forest enhances the isolation, muffling outside noise and focusing attention on subtle shifts within the property. Time inside Ashenfield Cottage feels different. Moments stretch longer, and simple movements take on weight and significance. The cries, the footsteps, and the occasional glimpse of figures create a rhythm that slows perception, making visitors feel as though they are stepping through a place suspended between past and present. Even brief stays leave a lingering impression that is difficult to shake. Ashenfield Cottage is both a ruin and a vessel of memory. It stands as a testament to tragedy, a place where the fire's echoes persist in subtle, perceptible ways. Figures appear in doorways, footsteps follow along empty halls. Smoke coils through rooms, and cries reverberate softly in the kitchen. The cottage does not threaten, yet it commands attention, inviting visitors to witness the past intertwined with the present. At night, the cottage is alive with quiet presence. Shadows linger, smoke curls through charred doorways, and figures materialize briefly before vanishing. Footsteps echo on floors long abandoned, and faint cries float on the air. Ashenfield Cottage remains a place where memory and perception converge, a structure holding the weight of its past and the subtle traces of those who never truly left. Hollow Pine's house sits deep within a dense forest, its silhouette dark against the fading light of dusk. The trees crowd close, their branches weaving together to form a canopy that swallows the sky and filters the remaining daylight into mottled shadows. From a distance, the house appears still and abandoned, but as one approaches, the sense of presence grows, a quiet awareness that the structure itself is observing. The forest around the house amplifies every sound. Branches scrape against broken windows, producing sharp, staccato noises. The scraping is random yet deliberate, as if warning trespassers that the space is claimed by forces unseen. The wind carries the scent of damp earth and old timber. And even small movements among the underbrush feel exaggerated, heightening the sense of caution. Inside, the house tells its own story. Shadows glide across the floors and walls, independent of natural light. Corners that appear empty in one moment seem occupied the next, forms shifting just beyond perception. Light glows in rooms without wiring or fixtures, illuminating faded wallpaper and furniture in ways that suggest activity, though no one is present. The effect is subtle, creating an immersive environment that challenges the senses. Footsteps echo along hallways, soft at first and then sharper, repeating with no clear source. Doors creak open slowly, and the faint clatter of objects moving occurs without visible cause. Even in rooms where sunlight filters weakly through gaps in the boarded windows, the shadows continue to move, independent of the natural light cycle. Visitors often pause, unsure if the movement is imagination or something more tangible. Whispers are another element of Hollow Pine's house that defy ordinary explanation. Some visitors report hearing voices directly in their ears, soft and fleeting, carrying messages that are unintelligible yet impossible to ignore. The whispers are intimate, almost personal, giving the impression that the house is aware of each person within it. They fade when attention is focused too strongly, leaving only the lingering sense of communication from an unseen presence. The structure itself seems to influence perception. Hallways curve slightly, corners are unexpectedly narrow. And doorways appear taller or shorter depending on the angle of approach. Rooms seem to expand or contract. And ordinary furnishings appear rearranged when viewed a second time. Even the floorboards respond subtly, creaking under minimal weight. and producing echoes that suggest movement where there is none. The combination of natural surroundings and architectural design contributes to the unsettling experience. Light filtering through the trees casts irregular patterns across walls, while the forest muffles distant sounds and amplifies closer ones. Wind carries the scraping of branches, the whisper of leaves, and the faint calls of nocturnal animals, blending with the house's own echoes to create a layered, immersive atmosphere. Time feels altered within Hollow Pines house. Seconds stretch, and moments linger. As if the building exists in a slightly different rhythm than the outside world. Visitors describe a heightened awareness, noticing details that would otherwise be overlooked. Subtle movements, the flicker of shadow, and faint sounds become pronounced, creating a continuous tension between observation and interpretation. Exploring the upper floors reveals further anomalies. Staircases seem steeper in places. And landings appear longer than expected. Rooms that were empty moments before may contain faint traces of light or shadow. And even when completely silent there is an unshakable impression that the space is occupied. Windows reflect movement not present. And doors swing gently despite still air. Outside, the forest continues its contribution to the house's character. Branches twist in the wind, creating shifting shadows that blend with those cast by the house. The ground is uneven, and small sounds of fallen leaves, snapping twigs that carry unnaturally far. The combination of these environmental factors with the phenomena inside makes the entire area feel alive, responsive, and attentive to human presence. Visitors often describe leaving the house with a profound sense of awe mixed with unease. The memories of shadows gliding across floors. Lights appearing in unlit rooms, and whispers felt directly in the ear remain vivid. Even hours after departure, the sensation of being observed or followed can linger, a subtle echo of the house's presence. Hollow Pines house endures as a place where the boundaries between reality and perception blur. It is a structure defined not only by physical materials but by atmosphere, history, and unexplained activity. Those who enter experience an environment that is immersive, responsive, and mysterious, leaving them with impressions that persist long after the forest and the house are behind them. The house does not threaten or chase. It exists quietly, attentive and patient. Holding its presence in the interplay of shadow, light, and sound. Hollow Pines house remains a destination for those seeking encounters with the extraordinary. A space where the natural and supernatural converge. And where every visitor departs with a sense that the building, and the forest surrounding it, remembers each step, each sound, and each whisper. Long after they have gone. Ravenswood Estate rises atop a hill, its grand silhouette visible for miles, a relic of wealth and ambition from another era. Once lavish, the mansion is now overrun with decay. Windows are shattered or clouded with dust. Paint peels from weathered walls, and gardens that were once manicured lie tangled with weeds and overgrown vines. Yet even in ruin, the estate commands attention. Its presence imposing against the fading light of dusk. As evening falls, black birds gather above the roof, circling endlessly in tight patterns. Their cries pierce the quiet air, filling the grounds with a sense of restless energy. The birds' wings beat in unison, creating a rhythm that echoes across the hills, blending with the creak of old timbers and the faint rustle of leaves. Visitors approaching the estate often pause at the edge of the property, sensing that these birds are both observers and sentinels, marking boundaries between the living and the history preserved within the mansion's walls. The windows of Ravenswood Estate are portals to another world. Faces appear briefly in the glass, translucent and shifting. Watching the grounds below. They vanish when approached, leaving only reflections of the decayed interior. And the gray sky beyond. The fleeting expressions are enough to unsettle even the most skeptical visitor. giving the impression that the estate itself remembers and observes, maintaining a presence that refuses to fade despite abandonment. Inside, hallways stretch with a sense of both grandeur and emptiness. The floors are covered with dust and debris, yet footsteps echo along the upper floors as though someone walks above. Doors shift slightly on their hinges without wind, and the faint creak of staircases adds to the sense of presence in spaces that should be uninhabited. The mansion seems to carry memory in its very structure, each beam and floorboard resonating with lives long past. Rooms once filled with elegance now bear the traces of time and neglect. Wallpaper curls from the walls. Chandeliers dangle precariously, and furniture sits draped in dust, as if frozen mid-use. Yet within the decay, the sense of lingering life persists. Some report catching glimpses of figures moving silently across large rooms. Shadows at first, then more distinct, only to dissolve when observed directly. The effect is subtle but consistent, creating an environment where the past is almost tangible, as if the estate itself preserves fragments of daily routines and forgotten rituals. The grounds around the mansion add to the atmosphere, leading to fountains now dry and cracked. Trees bend toward the estate, their branches scraping against walls and windows with the wind. The combination of natural overgrowth and architectural decay amplifies the sense of isolation, making every approach deliberate and measured. A sense that the estate is alive in ways beyond observation, a silent presence intertwined with the surrounding landscape. As night deepens, Ravenswood Estate grows more imposing. Shadows stretch along walls and staircases, reflecting the shifting light of moon and stars. Visitors report a heightened awareness of sound and space, noticing creaks, knocks, and shifting objects that remain otherwise unexplained. The estate seems to test attention, rewarding those who observe carefully with fleeting glimpses of its secrets, while leaving those less aware with unease and uncertainty. The black birds above continue their relentless circling, wings slicing through the night air. Their cries mingle with the mansiona's ambient sounds, forming a chorus of observation that blends natural and supernatural impression. The rhythm of their flight mirrors the mansiona's presence, marking time, movement, and attention, with a steady pulse that draws the visitor into awareness of the estate's scale and history. Leaving Ravenswood Estate often brings relief, yet the memory of the visit lingers. Faces in the windows, footsteps along empty floors, and the endless circling of birds. Imprint themselves on perception. Even when distant, the estate's silhouette continues to influence attention and thought. A reminder of the layers of history embedded in space and structure. Visitors often glance back at the hilltop, feeling that the mansion watches, that it continues to hold memory, and that the decay itself is part of a living narrative waiting to be experienced again. Ultimately, Ravenswood Estate is more than a structure of stone, wood, and glass. It is a repository of presence, memory, and history. The combination of architectural decay, natural overgrowth, black birds, and fleeting glimpses of figures creates an immersive environment, engaging sight, sound, and awareness. Each approach, each crossing of the grounds, is an encounter with both the tangible and the intangible, leaving visitors with a lasting impression of a place where the past is preserved not only in objects, but in perception itself, and where attention and observation are rewarded with the subtle but undeniable presence of life that endures beyond abandonment. Thornfield Hall stands atop a hill, framed by gnarled trees whose branches reach skyward like skeletal hands. The stone exterior is weathered, covered in patches of moss and lichen, giving the mansion an air of permanence and decay. Windows, many cracked or clouded with age, reflect muted light, and the heavy main doors swing slowly on rusted hinges even when the air is still. Visitors arrive expecting grandeur, yet they encounter a place steeped in silence, tension, and the weight of unseen presence. Inside, the hallways stretch long and shadowed, lined with faded wallpaper and portraits whose subjects watch with blank expressions. Floors creak underfoot, sending echoes down corridors that seem endless. The air carries a chill that penetrates deeper than temperature, a subtle dampness that settles into bones and nerves. Even the faintest sound is amplified, every step, breath, and rustle of fabric creating awareness of the surrounding emptiness. The main doors move with a life of their own. Creak and swing slightly, sometimes opening wider or closing abruptly. Yet no wind or force is apparent. The sound resonates across the vast interior. A soft warning of presence. It draws attention, pulling the mind toward alertness, and creates the sense that the building itself is alive. Many have glimpsed a pale woman in the corridors. She appears suddenly, standing silently at the far end, her features indistinct yet unmistakably human. Minutes pass, yet she does not move, remaining in place as though waiting for recognition or silently observing. By the time the steps close in, she vanishes, leaving only the lingering impression of presence and the quiet echo of absence. Her appearances are unpredictable, yet consistent enough to create anticipation and unease. Doors slam with sudden force, startling those nearby. They occur without warning, often in empty rooms or at the end of hallways. The sound is sharp, reverberating against stone and wood, leaving a silence that is heavier than before. Furniture shifts overnight, chairs displaced slightly, tables angled differently, and objects moved from their previous locations. These changes are subtle yet unmistakable, a reminder that the hall is not entirely inert, that some force acts with deliberate, quiet intent. Walls themselves contribute to the atmosphere. The manor's structure becomes an active participant, conveying emotion and presence through subtle movement and sound. The effect is disorienting and immersive, drawing attention to details that might otherwise be ignored. The menorah's structure becomes an active participant, conveying emotion and presence through subtle movement and sound. Light and shadow play critical roles. Sunlight entering through tall windows creates long, angled patterns across floors and walls, shifting as hours pass. At night, moonlight filters through cracks, casting ghostly reflections and deepening shadows. The interplay of light and darkness obscures and reveals simultaneously, making ordinary corridors and rooms appear unfamiliar and mutable. Every glance and step requires careful observation, sharpening senses and heightening awareness. The upper floors are particularly unsettling. Narrow staircases creak under minimal weight, and ceilings arch overhead in patterns that distort perception. Bedrooms retain remnants of past occupancy, tattered curtains, dust-covered furniture, and objects that suggest sudden absence. Here, cold spots move unpredictably, arriving in one corner and dissipating in another, a presence felt but unseen, tangible yet intangible. The effect is cumulative, layering tension and awareness throughout the building. The library and parlor offer further immersion. Bookshelves lean slightly, books displaced or fallen, as if the room remembers previous hands. A faint aroma of old paper and polish lingers. Steps are muffled on thick carpets. Yet the space seems to react, shifting temperature and sound in ways that suggest observation. Visitors report feeling watched from corners, from spaces just beyond vision. As though awareness extends beyond what can be seen or measured. As night deepens, all elements converge. Doors creak and swing. Shadows stretch and bend. The cold settles more heavily. Silence becomes a canvas for subtle noises. A floorboard groans. A distant tap echoes through the air. The whisper of movement too quiet to pinpoint. The mind interprets these signs and patterns that create engagement, curiosity, and tension simultaneously. fostering an immersive experience that is both vivid and unsettling without being violent or graphic. Memory of Thornfield Hall lingers long after departure. The pale woman, the shifting furniture, the low moans of walls, and the creaking doors remain in thought, coloring perception of quiet spaces and shadowed hallways elsewhere. The building impresses itself upon visitors, creating lasting awareness of environment, presence, and subtle energy. It demonstrates the interplay between architecture, history, and human perception, offering a continuous story without words, accessible to those attentive enough to experience it fully. Thornfield Hall endures, silent, patient, and immutable. Stone, timber, and shadow persist through seasons and decades, holding impressions of past life and ongoing presence. Each visitor becomes part of its narrative, their awareness shaping experience even as the building remains constant. The hall invites observation, reflection, and careful attention, offering a profound engagement with history, space, and the subtle interplay of the seen and unseen, creating a lasting journey into atmosphere, memory, and the quiet persistence of place. Cragmore House stands atop a windswept hill, its silhouette jagged against the sky. Portions of the structure have collapsed, leaving gaping holes in walls and rooflines. Broken balconies jut outward, their railings splintered and warped. The hillside is overgrown with weeds and thorn shrubs, curling around the remnants of a once grand estate. From a distance, the house appears deserted, yet there is a weight to its presence, a sense that it observes quietly from above. Visitors report that the air changes as they approach. Temperature drops sharply, the chills settling into skin and clothing. Even on warm days, a cold permeates the surrounding space, lingering in shadows and corners. The wind seems to respond to movement, carrying whispers along broken hallways and across shattered floors. The sound is soft at first, almost indistinguishable from the rustle of leaves or shifting debris, yet unmistakably deliberate. Figures have been seen on the broken balconies, motionless and watching. They appear pale against the crumbling wood and sky, their gaze fixed on distant points beyond the hill. When approached, they vanish without trace, leaving only a sense of weight and presence where none should exist. The effect is subtle but pervasive, creating a mixture of unease and fascination in those who observe them. The interior of Cragmore House is a maze of decay. Floorboards sag beneath the slightest pressure, and ceilings are punctured with holes that allow light and wind to enter unpredictably. Dust and debris cover every surface, drifting lazily in shafts of sunlight or moonlight. The walls carry scars of neglect and weather, yet the house retains a sense of its former grandeur in the layout, the remaining moldings, and the intricate, though broken, staircases. Whispers carry through the hallways, names uttered that no living voice has spoken aloud. They drift from corners and cracks, moving unpredictably from room to room. Sometimes the sound seems to come from the collapsed sections of the structure, traveling along beams and broken walls before fading. Visitors often report feeling drawn toward the source, a subtle tug that is both magnetic and disquieting, as if the house itself guides attention to places it wishes to be acknowledged. The broken balconies serve as vantage points that reinforce the house's presence. Shadows shift along the railings, extending beyond what is visible, hinting at forms just out of reach. Figures occasionally appear silhouetted against the sky, watching, never moving in a direct manner. The effect is heightened by wind and light, creating images that seem both solid and illusory. Observers report a lingering awareness of these presences even after leaving the house, as if they have been imprinted on memory. Cragmore House seems to affect time itself. Moments stretch and contract, and the perception of distance is altered by the gaps in walls and floors. A short walk across the hall can feel endless, while a glance from a broken window across the hill can seem suspended. Sounds of wind, creaking wood, and shifting debris are constant companions. They combine with whispers, the soft shuffle of unseen feet, and distant echoes to create a layered atmosphere. The interplay of light and shadow adds to the effect, making every corner and broken room seem simultaneously familiar and alien. Even the smallest movements of the adjustment of a step, the shift of a hand are amplified in perception, reinforcing the sense that the house is alive in subtle, patient ways. Visitors frequently report sensations of being guided. A light pressure on an arm, a nudge at the shoulder, or the subtle movement of air along the spine suggests invisible hands steering attention or motion. The effect is never violent, only insistent, as if the house wishes to be acknowledged or explored in a particular pattern. Each visitor experiences this differently, yet all describe it as inescapable and precise. Despite decay and ruin, Cragmore House possesses undeniable beauty. Sunlight illuminates dust-filled air in golden shafts, broken windows frame distant landscapes. The combination of architectural detail and natural surroundings creates a space that is both tragic and mesmerizing. Shadows pool in corners, stretching along collapsed floors. Broken railings cast patterns that shift with the light. The combination of architectural detail and natural surroundings creates a space that is both tragic and mesmerizing. Time spent within the house leaves a lasting impression. The cold, the figures, the whispers, and the subtle guidance continue to resonate long after departure. Dreams often replay the broken halls, shadowed balconies, and drifting fog, reinforcing the presence of the house in memory. Even those who leave quickly feel the lingering effect of Cragmore House, a reminder that the past and the unseen continue to inhabit the space it occupies. Cragmore House endures atop the hill, partially collapsed yet complete in presence. Its broken balconies, sagging floors, and whispered names form a landscape of memory and energy that is impossible to ignore. Crossing its halls, observing its shadows, and feeling its subtle guidance. The house is not merely a structure of wood and stone. It is a living archive of presence, history, and unseen attention. Leaving every visitor with the enduring awareness of a place that watches, remembers, and persists beyond time itself. Gray Hollow Cabin sits deep within the woods, a small log structure surrounded by towering trees and dense underbrush. The roof is sagging slightly, and the walls are darkened with age and weather. A narrow path winds through the forest, leading travelers to the cabin, yet it is easily missed among the shadows of the trees. By day, it appears abandoned and quiet, an ordinary relic of rural life. By night, the cabin takes on an atmosphere that feels alive, as though it is aware of those who approach. Lantern lights flicker inside even when no fire burns. Observers report a faint glow through windows, swaying gently as though carried by invisible hands. The light is warm and inconsistent, casting moving shadows across the interior walls. Visitors who peer inside describe the glow as inviting yet unsettling, illuminating the corners of the cabin just enough to suggest movement where there should be none. Silhouettes of children are sometimes visible within the cabin. They move slowly across rooms, laughing or running without sound. Their mouths open and close, but no noise emerges. Some visitors stand frozen, unsure whether to approach, yet the figures disappear if anyone crosses the threshold, leaving only empty space and a lingering sense of presence. Fog often rolls into the clearing surrounding the cabin from seemingly nowhere. The fog drifts along the forest floor, obscuring the narrow paths that lead to Gray Hollow Cabin. Trees appear to fade into the mist, and familiar landmarks vanish. Travelers report that the fog thickens near the cabin, creating a barrier that feels deliberate, isolating the structure from the outside world. Sounds become muffled, the crunch of leaves underfoot fading into the hush of the fog. The interior of the cabin holds echoes of its past. Floors creak softly under even the lightest steps, and wooden beams seem to hum with subtle resonance. Objects are often found slightly displaced, chairs or small items shifted from their original positions. Visitors sense the space responds to movement, as though the cabin itself records and reacts to those who enter. Lantern light and fog combine to create illusions that are difficult to ignore. Shadows stretch unnaturally along walls, and the silhouettes of children appear more detailed in the shifting light, their movements fluid yet unreal. Observers feel as though they are watching a memory play out, a scene caught between past and present. Even when no one is visible, the impression of activity remains, persistent and haunting. The surrounding woods enhance the effect. Branches sway in the wind, casting flickering shadows across the exterior walls. Sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the call of distant animalsa. Creating an environment where perception and reality feel intertwined. Visitors become acutely aware of every sound and movement, each detail amplified by the isolation of the setting. Time seems altered near Grey Hollow Cabin. Those who approach at dusk or after dark report a sensation of slowed movement. Steps feel heavier, minutes stretch longer, and perception sharpens. Lanterns flicker with irregular rhythm, shadows extend and retract, and the fog drifts with a patience that defies natural patterns. Travelers often describe the experience as immersive, as if they are part of a scene unfolding in multiple layers of reality at once. Even brief encounters leave a lasting impression. Observers remember the pale silhouettes of children, the gentle sway of lantern light, and the sudden appearance of fog obscuring familiar paths. Some report lingering sounds after leaving. The soft creak of floorboards or distant laughter echoing in memory. The cabin retains its presence, a subtle force that continues to interact with those who have entered. Grey Hollow Cabin exists as a space where past and present overlap. Its small rooms, wooden beams, and simple furnishings are transformed at night by light, shadow, and mist. Silhouettes move through the glow of lanterns, fog drifts along paths and forest floors, and the air carries the impression of unseen observers. Visitors feel watched, yet the experience is never aggressive. The cabin does not chase or harm, it merely exists, alive in a quiet and patient way. The forest and cabin together create a setting where perception is heightened and ordinary experience becomes unusual. The fog isolates the clearing, lantern light reveals movement that cannot be explained. And shadows suggest life where none should be. Visitors sense that they are part of a narrative embedded in the cabin, a story of memory and presence that continues to unfold with each passing night. At night, Grey Hollow Cabin is a place of subtle mystery. Lanterns flicker without flame. Silhouettes of children play silently in charred light. And fog curls through the forest and clearing alike. Every step on the floorboards. Every glance at a shadow. And every pause near the doorway carries weight and significance. The cabin exists quietly, observing and recording. A space where memory, perception, and presence converge into a single, immersive experience that lingers long after visitors leave. Shattered Oaks Mansion stands amid overgrown gardens and crumbling stone walls. A grand home once filled with wealth and celebration, now succumbing to time and neglect. Its FAA section A is cracked and peeling, windows broken or boarded, yet glimpses of former elegance remain. Ornate columns lean slightly, and fragments of decorative trim hint at the luxury that once defined the estate. Inside, the decay is stark. Floors sag under layers of dust and debris. Ceilings show water stains and collapsed plaster, and furniture lies scattered or broken. Despite the ruin, figures are often glimpsed moving through the shadows. Men and women in formal attire glide silently across rooms, pausing briefly before disappearing into corners or behind doorways. Their movements are deliberate, almost choreographed, as if they continue routines from another era. Visitors report sensations that defy explanation. Cold hands graze shoulders, brushing without cause, leaving a lingering chill. The touch is brief but startling, creating an immediate awareness. That the space is not entirely empty. Guests often glance around, expecting to see someone, yet the mansion remains still. The only movement that of dust drifting in beams of light from shattered windows. Whispers emanate from the basement, low and fragmented. Sentences begin but do not finish, words repeat and echo along the stone walls. The sound is distinct yet elusive, as though trying to communicate without clarity. Those who approach the stairway feel the temperature drop sharply. And a sense of heavy observation presses from below. Footsteps are sometimes heard in the empty corridors leading to the cellar, further reinforcing the impression that the mansion remembers and responds to those who enter. The architecture of Shattered Oaks Mansion amplifies perception. Hallways stretch longer than expected. Corners curve in ways that disorient. Staircases creak under the lightest movement. Light from broken windows casts long shadows, making ordinary objects appear strange. Mirrors reflect glimpses of movement that do not correspond with reality, creating the impression that the space is alive and attentive. Even in daylight, the mansion exerts an unusual influence. Dust particles hang suspended in rays of sunlight, and the faint echo of wind through broken panes produces sound that seems layered, almost conversational. Shadows stretch and shift, giving the illusion of figures moving just beyond sight. Visitors notice how the silence feels weighted, as if the building itself is listening and aware. Visitors notice how the silence feels weighted, as if the building itself is listening and aware. The gardens surrounding the mansion contribute to the unsettling atmosphere. Overgrown shrubs and leaning trees crowd the pathways, rustling in the wind with noises that suggest footsteps or movement. The once orderly landscape is now wild, blending natural decay with the mansiona's architectural deterioration. Light filters through the dense foliage in irregular patterns, creating fleeting shapes that appear to shift when not directly observed. Stairwells and upper floors hold particular significance for those who explore the mansion. Rooms that were once bedrooms or salons are now filled with broken furniture and faded wallpaper. Yet figures continue to appear, moving among debris with an air of formality. Observers describe an uncanny sense of time stretching, where minutes feel elongated. And perception of movement is heightened. Each shadow, each sound, becomes magnified, creating a deeply immersive experience. The mansiona's basement is the most notorious area. Whispers are most frequent here, accompanied by sudden chills and an inexplicable weight in the air. Footsteps echo in directions that do not align with visible spaces. And light seems to behave differently, pooling in corners that should be dark, or fading where illumination is expected. Visitors often hesitate before descending, aware that the environment is unpredictable and responsive. Sound is a key component of the experience. The mansion carries echoes that amplify minor movements into something larger. Doors creak without cause, floorboards groan under invisible pressure, and whispers drift along hallways and corridors. Even the faintest noises can create tension, making travelers hyper-aware of every detail, every sensation. Despite the decay and the phenomena, Shattered Oaks Mansion retains a strange allure. Its history is tangible, felt in the preserved elegance of certain architectural elements, and the persistence of activity in abandoned rooms. Visitors are drawn not only by curiosity, but by the intensity of the atmosphere, where past and present coexist in subtle, often disorienting ways. By night, the mansion becomes a stage for perception and memory. Shadows lengthen, whispers intensify, and figures in formal attire appear with greater clarity. The interplay of light, decay, and ambient sound creates an environment that is immersive and atmospheric. Blending the tangible and the inexplicable, even brief moments spent in these rooms leave lasting impressions. Shattered Oaks Mansion endures as a place where architecture, history, and unexplained phenomena converge. Figures move silently through debris, cold touches linger, and voices echo from spaces long abandoned. Visitors depart carrying vivid memories of the house, a combination of awe, unease, and respect for a space where the past continues to live alongside the present. Widowa's Peak House clings to the edge of a cliff, its foundation anchored against jagged stone and overlooking a lake that stretches like a sheet of glass below. The house appears stately, its white walls and tall windows catching sunlight and reflecting it across the water. The surrounding landscape is serene, with rolling hills, trees that sway in the breeze, and the calm surface of the lake sparkling beneath the sky. Yet as dusk approaches, the character of the house changes, taking on a presence that is difficult to ignore. Visitors who approach in the evening often notice a shadow moving along the balcony. She appears as a woman, dark and indistinct, her form shifting with the fading light. The figure does not speak or react to observation, yet there is a sense of awareness, as if she notes each presence on the grounds below. At times she pauses at the railing, gazing outward over the lake, and her stance suggests contemplation or longing. Her presence is compelling, drawing attention while evoking unease. Inside, the house carries the weight of emptiness. Staircases rise and twist through the interior, polished wood now dulled with age and neglect. Footsteps echo along these stairs, measured and deliberate, as if someone walks just ahead or behind, yet the space remains unoccupied. The sound follows visitors, rising and falling in a rhythm that seems both familiar and unpredictable. Every step on the old wood amplifies the sensation that the house is aware, its hallways and floors retaining the memory of movement over decades. The rooms are largely empty, furniture draped with dust covers, and walls lined with faded paintings. Light from the lake filters through tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor and highlighting cracks in plaster and worn woodwork. Occasionally, the shadowy woman appears at the edges of these rooms, glimpsed through doorways or reflected faintly in mirrors. She does not move toward the observer, but her gaze and posture suggest an invitation, a quiet beckoning that is both enticing and unnerving. From the balcony, the cliff drops sharply to the water below. Visitors report that the air carries a change near the edge, a tension that heightens awareness. The shadowy figure seems to linger there with purpose, turning slightly as though acknowledging those who draw near. The effect is subtle yet persistent, a sense that attention is being measured, as if the house and the figure atop the balcony are testing caution, curiosity, and instinct. Evening light transforms the house and its surroundings into a space of contrasts. The lake below mirrors the crimson and gold of dusk, adding reflections that seem to flicker and distort with motion. Every window, every railing, and every dark corner becomes a point of potential observation, drawing the eye and attention with a magnetic quality. The sensation of presence continues through hallways and stairwells. Footsteps may follow, slow or fast, echoing as if someone walks just out of sight. Doors may shift slightly on their hinges, settling differently than before. The house communicates in these subtle movements, a dialogue of sound, shadow, and awareness that heightens attention without direct threat. Visitors find themselves deliberate in motion, conscious of every step and glance. The surrounding landscape contributes to the atmosphere. Trees bend near the cliffside, their branches brushing windows and railings. The wind carries sounds from the lake, gentle waves against rock or the distant calls of birds. Even natural movement feels amplified, as if the house reacts to sound and motion, integrating the environment into its presence. The combination of interior echoes, exterior wind, and shifting shadows creates a continuous immersive experience. Those who linger near the balcony often describe a sense of pull. Not aggressive, but insistent, a feeling that the shadowed figure invites contemplation or approach. The cliff's edge stark, and the figure's form seems to frame the moment, holding attention and testing instinct. Visitors may hesitate, sensing the boundary between curiosity and caution, aware that the house and figure heighten perception and demand mindfulness of action. Leaving Widowa's Peak House is often accompanied by reflection. Visitors glance back at the cliffside mansion, noting the balcony, the windows, and the shadows within. The echo of footsteps, the fleeting presence of the shadowy figure, and the memory of the house's imposing position remain vivid. Even after departing, the sensation of awareness endures, a quiet imprint of the space and its inhabitant, lingering in thought and imagination. Ultimately, Widow's Peak House exists as more than a structure on a cliff. The shadowy woman, the echoing footsteps, and the interaction of interior space with the dramatic exterior create an immersive environment. Visitors experience heightened attention, reflection, and awareness, engaging sight, sound, and instinct. Ironwood Estate stands at the edge of a long-forgotten lane, its silhouette broken and partially boarded against the sky. The roof sags slightly, and windows are cracked or shuttered, yet even in decay, the house exudes a presence that draws attention. Loose boards creak and groan under the weight of wind or settling timber, while faint drafts whisper through gaps, carrying distant scents of wood, earth, and dampness. The estate feels alive in its silence, a structure suspended between memory and neglect, holding space for both the past and the unseen. Visitors approaching the house notice subtle sounds before seeing the structure clearly. A faint ringing drifts from within, like bells struck by no visible hand, their echoes threading through the hallways and staircases. The sound is intermittent, soft, almost teasing in its irregularity, drawing curiosity and apprehension simultaneously. Each chime resonates differently depending on position, floor, and room, creating a layered, immersive experience that engages the senses while remaining just beyond complete understanding. The interior amplifies the house's presence. Dust hangs thick in the air, disturbed only by movement. Floors creak underfoot, echoing across corridors lined with peeling wallpaper and faded portraits whose eyes seem to follow from cracked frames. Rooms are unevenly lit, light spilling through boarded windows and casting fractured patterns across walls and furniture. Shadows bend and merge, shifting with the angle of observation, giving the impression of movement even when no one else is present. Figures have been glimpsed within the estate, semi-transparent and elusive. Attempting to approach or confront them results only in disappearance, leaving behind the sense of presence and a lingering chill in the air. These visions are rare, appearing sporadically. But they contribute to the estate's reputation for an awareness that is palpable but intangible. Certain rooms hold a heaviness that visitors cannot ignore. The air feels thicker, cooler, and charged with a subtle energy that presses gently against the skin. Movements become deliberate and slow, each step measured against the sensation of unseen observation. These spaces are often quiet, yet silence is never empty, carrying weight that hints at histories embedded in wood, plaster, and stone. The estate seems to breathe in response to attention, creating an immersive, almost sentient atmosphere. The architecture of Ironwood Estate shapes perception further. Narrow hallways elongate unexpectedly, staircases twist with subtle irregularity, and doorways frame spaces in ways that distort scale. Furniture is scattered unevenly, some pieces tipped or angled as if displaced overnight. Carpets are worn in patterns that suggest frequent, purposeful movement, though no living occupant is present. Light interacts dramatically with the interior. Faint sunlight through broken shutters creates dynamic shadows that shift with the hour, revealing corners previously unnoticed and highlighting textures of decay. At dusk, the house takes on a richer tone, shadows lengthen, edges soften, and a faint glow of remaining daylight filters through glass and cracks. The combination of dim light and movement of shadows amplifies the perception of figures, heightens tension, and deepens immersion in the space. The combination of dim light and movement of shadows amplifies the perception of figures, heightens tension, and deepens immersion in the space. Sound further defines experience. The intermittent bell tones blend with creaking floorboards and distant tapping of falling debris, and occasional drafts that rustle loose wallpaper or curtain remnants. Silence punctuates these events. A subtle language of presence that informs perception and shapes the emotional experience of being inside the estate. That informs perception and shapes the emotional experience of being inside the estate. The exact script text for this scene. Time within Ironwood Estate feels altered. Minutes may stretch, punctuated by long silences and unexpected sounds. Hours may pass without clear awareness of their length, as the layering of sensory information absorbs attention. The rhythm of the house itself dictates movement, guiding steps, pauses, and observation. Visitors develop heightened awareness, noticing details that might otherwise be overlooked, attuning to subtle changes in temperature, shadow, and sound. Memory of the estate lingers long after departure. Visitors recount the faint ringing of bells, the semi-transparent figures, and the movement of air that carries the weight of presence. The heaviness in certain rooms remains palpable in recollection, influencing perception of space and environment elsewhere. Ironwood Estate leaves impressions that are both atmospheric and psychological, integrating sensory experience with reflection and curiosity. Ironwood Estate endures in patient quiet. Its walls, timbers, and floors continue to bear the weight of time, memory, and the subtle persistence of unseen presence. Each visitor becomes part of its story, contributing attention and perception to an ongoing, immersive narrative. The estate exemplifies the intersection of architecture, atmosphere, and history, offering a space that is simultaneously tangible and elusive, inviting observation, reflection, and a deep engagement with the subtle, persistent energy of place. Black Hollow Lodge rests quietly at the edge of a dense forest, its stone and timber FAA section Ade weathered by nearly a century of abandonment. Ivy climbs the walls in thick tangles, creeping through cracks in the masonry and curling over windows that have long been shuttered. The surrounding trees stretch high and close, their dark trunks forming a natural barrier that blocks sunlight, leaving the lodge in perpetual shadow for much of the day. Even from a distance, there is a sense that the building is alive, observing every approach with a patient stillness. Inside, the lodge is filled with the scent of aged wood, dust, and lingering smoke. Floors creak under the lightest step, echoing through corridors that were once filled with laughter and conversation. Fireplaces sit cold and empty, yet visitors often report glimpsing figures dressed in old-fashioned clothing standing nearby. They do not move quickly, merely observing, their presence subtle yet undeniable. Approaching them causes them to vanish, leaving only a residual feeling of weight and presence in the room. Doors throughout the lodge behave strangely. They creak open and shut without cause, swinging just enough to catch the attention of anyone nearby. The sound is deliberate, measured, echoing off walls and ceilings in ways that make the building feel alive. Sometimes, a door will appear closed when first approached, only to be slightly ajar moments later. This subtle movement contributes to the impression that Black Hollow Lodge monitors its visitors, guiding their attention through unseen influence. Shadows move differently here than in ordinary buildings. They gather in corners, stretching along floors and walls in deliberate patterns that defy natural light. Shifting in ways that mimic form and gesture, hinting at figures that are never fully seen. Observers often feel the shadows responding to their presence, subtly altering when noticed, reinforcing the sense that the lodge itself possesses awareness. Even brief glimpses leave lasting impressions, the memory of motion etched clearly despite the absence of a tangible source. The memory of motion etched clearly despite the absence of a tangible source. The lodge has remained empty since the 1930s, yet its interior retains a vivid sense of life. Furniture is covered in sheets, rugs are faded and worn, and chandeliers hang in quiet suspension from the ceilings. Dust motes drift in shafts of light filtering through cracked windows, moving slowly as if time itself has been slowed within these walls. The combination of decay and preserved detail creates a hauntingly beautiful atmosphere, one that captivates and unnerves simultaneously. Visitors often experience sudden changes in temperature. Rooms can shift from warm to icy cold in moments, with no discernible cause. The chill carries a weight, pressing against skin and clothing, heightening awareness and amplifying every sound. Footsteps, the sway of curtains, and even distant creaks are intensified, producing an immersive environment where every detail feels significant. The lodge seems to breathe subtly, responding to presence with changes in light, sound, and sensation. In the hallways, the whispers of the past are almost tangible. Some guests report faint murmurs, repeating words and names that are never spoken aloud. They seem to come from corners, ceilings, and walls, reinforcing the sense that the building itself is a living repository of memory. Fireplaces serve as focal points of perception. Figures often appear near them, lingering as if waiting or observing. They do not interact directly with visitors, yet their presence is felt in subtle shifts of air, temperature, and attention, heightening both fascination and unease. Even brief stays in Black Hollow Lodge leave lasting impressions. Visitors report a sense of being watched, guided, and occasionally redirected through hallways and rooms. The combination of visual, auditory, and tactile cues produces a layered experience that is immersive and persistent. Dreams following a visit often reflect the loggia's interior, corridors, and flickering shadows, reinforcing the memory of presence that cannot be easily explained or dismissed. The sense of presence that cannot be easily explained or dismissed. The exterior of the lodge contributes to the overall atmosphere. The surrounding forest grows thick, branches swaying to create patterns of light and shadow across the walls. Broken windows and overgrown grounds distort perception, making distances and angles appear altered. Even approaching the building for the first time evokes awareness, a recognition that the place holds more than wood and stone. It carries history, energy, and unseen attention, all waiting quietly for those who enter. Black Hollow Lodge endures as it has for nearly a century, a structure of stone, timber, and memory that transcends abandonment. Its fireplaces, corridors, and broken windows hold echoes of past life, while shadows and whispers persist in the present. Crossing its floors, observing its figures, and hearing its subtle sounds is a journey into a space where history, perception, and subtle energy converge. The lodge exists beyond ordinary time, leaving every visitor with the inescapable impression of a place that remembers, observes, and continues to exist as a quiet, living presence. The roof is steep and heavy with ice, and broken windows punctuate the FAA sectionade, their jagged edges catching dim light and throwing fractured shadows across the snow-covered ground. By night, it exudes a presence that feels almost alive, cold and patient, watching every movement around its perimeter. Figures often appear near the broken windows, their forms still and blank, staring outward toward the frozen lake or the shadowed trees beyond. Even when the wind blows fiercely and snow swirls across the frozen ground, the figures remain, impervious and silent, yet undeniably present. Visitors report a persistent cold that clings to their clothing and skin, more than what the winter air would suggest. It feels concentrated near the manor itself, pressing inward with a subtle weight. Some have felt the brush of unseen hands, a fleeting chill across shoulders, or a drop in temperature as they move through corridors. The sensation is never violent, but it creates an impression that the house itself breathes and responds to the presence of others. Unseen voices carry across empty rooms and hallways. Travelers describe hearing their names called softly, the sound close and intimate, yet with no source to identify. The voice lingers for a moment and then vanishes, leaving only silence and the faint echo of wind through broken windows. The effect is startling, a sudden awareness that the manor is aware, acknowledging, and observing those who enter. The floors creak underfoot as though bearing invisible weight. Steps echo in corridors where no one walks, creating rhythms that feel deliberate and synchronized. Visitors report pausing mid-step, straining to identify another presence, only to find the hall empty. The creaking continues in patterns that do not match their own movements, amplifying the sense of being accompanied by unseen occupants. The interior of Frost Manor is both grand and decayed. Wood-paneled walls are worn, and furniture sits in thick layers of dust. Shadows stretch unnaturally along corridors and rooms, bending with the angles of the architecture. Broken windows allow shafts of pale moonlight to illuminate surfaces, creating shapes and reflections that seem to move independently. The combination of light, shadow, and frozen air heightens perception, making ordinary objects appear imbued with silent life. The frozen lake beside the manor contributes to the atmosphere. Its surface reflects moonlight in shifting patterns, and the quiet hiss of ice expanding adds a subtle, rhythmic backdrop. Snow drifts along the edge of the lake, smoothing footprints and softening sound, amplifying the sensation of isolation. Visitors approaching Frost Manor often note that the world seems muted, distant, and slower, as if time itself bends near the house. Corridors within the manor feel layered with memory. Chairs are slightly displaced. Curtains drift gently despite still air. And objects sometimes appear moved when visitors return from another room. These subtle changes are never abrupt but create an impression of continuous observation. The house seems to retain traces of those who once occupied it. Or perhaps those who passed near it. Blending past and present into a single, haunting experience. At the broken windows, shadows often linger, more pronounced in the shifting light of daybreak or twilight. Observers describe seeing outlines of figures in long coats or flowing garments, standing perfectly still, their features obscured but human in proportion. When approached, the shapes vanish, leaving only the frost-covered glass and the sound of wind through the broken frames. Time within Frost Manor seems fluid. Moments stretch longer than expected. Footsteps echo for longer than logic allows. The rhythm of creaking boards is subtly delayed. Travelers report a disorientation. A feeling that seconds are lengthened and perception sharpened. The combination of cold, shadows, and ambient sound creates a suspended awareness, making each step and glance feel significant. Even brief visits leave a lingering impression. The figures near windows. The cold brush of unseen presence, the whispered names, and the creaking floors embed themselves into memory. Visitors describe dreams filled with pale light, frozen corridors, and echoes of motion that mimic the manor's rhythm. Frost Manor impresses itself quietly, creating experiences that are subtle yet profound. Frost Manor exists as a space where architecture, environment, and unseen presence converge. Its cold stone walls, broken windows, and frost-laden halls create a setting where shadows seem alive and memory persists in air and floorboards. Figures appear without explanation, voices call without source, and footsteps echo as though measured by an invisible observer. The manor does not chase or threaten, yet it holds the attention of those who approach, drawing them into a narrative that blends perception, memory, and presence. At night, Frost Manor is most alive. Figures stand silently near broken windows. Cold air presses inward. Footsteps echo along empty halls. And faint voices call across rooms. The frozen lake mirrors the stillness, while foggy breath of winter drifts along the ground. Visitors leave with sensations that linger. A quiet awareness of the menorah's patient presence. And the undeniable impression that Frost Manor watches, remembers, and exists in a space beyond ordinary perception. Ashwood Cottage sits quietly among tangled trees and overgrown shrubs, its paint faded and siding weathered by decades of neglect. Vines creep along the walls, wrapping around windows and doors, blurring the line between nature and structure. The house seems to watch, holding the weight of time and memory within its walls. Visitors often notice a subtle shift as they approach. The air grows cooler, and ordinary sounds are muted, replaced by the soft hum of leaves and the occasional creak of old wood. The overgrown yard adds to the sense of isolation, each step through the long grass heightening awareness of the cottage and the history it contains. Inside, the decay is evident but not complete. Dust coats surfaces, and furniture leans or lies toppled. Yet the structure remains intact, with attic beams and floorboards holding despite years of neglect. Shadows stretch across the rooms in irregular patterns, moving independently of natural light. Guests often report fleeting figures glimpsed in corners, in attics, or descending basements. Present only for a moment before vanishing as if swallowed by the darkness. Whispers are a constant companion for those who explore Ashwood Cottage. Voices repeat conversations from long ago, fragments of sentences that hang in the air, indistinct yet recognizable. The effect is immersive, creating a sense of presence that is both intimate and disorienting. Sometimes faint, sometimes startlingly clear. The effect is immersive, creating a sense of presence that is both intimate and disorienting. Doors open and close without wind. Even in still air, a room that was quiet moments before may suddenly resonate with the sound of a door swinging gently on its hinges. This movement is subtle, yet enough to make visitors pause and look around, questioning whether someone is near or if the house itself has stirred in response to their presence. The attic carries its own mysteries. Shadows appear along the beams, moving as though observing the rooms below. Light filtering through cracks in the roof casts shifting patterns that resemble human forms, enhancing the sense of fleeting figures. The temperature here often drops suddenly, leaving a chill that travels along the spine and reinforces the feeling of unseen eyes. In the basement, the echoes of conversation are strongest. Footsteps can be heard along the stone floors, though no one is present. Visitors report a sensation of movement behind them, a pressure in the air that cannot be measured or explained. The basement seems to hold the memory of activity long ended, a space where the past lingers with persistence. Ashwood Cottage is shaped as much by its surroundings as by the building itself. Trees crowd the house, their branches scratching against windows and siding, producing irregular sounds that mingle with footsteps and whispers. Sunlight filters in unevenly through overgrowth and broken glass, creating flickers of illumination that seem almost deliberate. Reflections in old mirrors and glass panes sometimes show shapes that vanish when looked at directly. Time within the cottage behaves differently. Moments stretch, and perception shifts with every step. Shadows move in unexpected ways, sounds carry unusually, and the familiar layout of rooms feels subtly altered. Visitors become hyper-aware of the environment, noticing the smallest details, a floorboard creaking, a curtain moving without wind, or the faint repetition of a phrase that seems to have originated decades ago. Exploring the kitchen or parlor, visitors often sense that the space is occupied by someone unseen. Objects may appear slightly displaced, and chairs seem to shift position. The house does not threaten, it does not chase. Instead, it holds its occupants in a tense awareness, reminding them that the history of the space is alive. Reminding them that the history of the space is alive in a subtle but persistent way. Even in daylight, Ashwood Cottage evokes a mixture of fascination and unease. The overgrowth, broken windows, and weathered wood create a visual impression of decay. Yet the presence of unseen activity suggests life within the structure. Shadows flicker where they should not. Voices drift from empty rooms. And the sense of observation persists. As evening falls, the atmosphere intensifies. The whispering voices grow more pronounced. Figures in attics or basements may appear with greater clarity, moving briefly through corners or near doorways before dissolving into the shadows. Sounds of doors swinging or floorboards creaking resonate more strongly, creating a layered, immersive experience. Visitors leave Ashwood Cottage carrying vivid impressions. The fleeting figures, whispers, and moving doors linger in memory, blending with the visual decay of the house and the overgrown landscape surrounding it. Each step inside the structure reinforces the impression that the cottage is aware, holding the presence of past occupants alongside the modern visitor. Ashwood Cottage endures as a space where history and perception converge. Its overgrown exterior, crumbling interior, and persistent activity create an environment that captivates, unsettles, and fascinates. The house remains a quiet, observant entity, where shadows glide, voices echo, and the past exists alongside the present, leaving each visitor with a profound sense of wonder and awareness that endures long after they have departed. Crimson Hall stands as a monument to both grandeur and decay, its large structure looming over the surrounding landscape. The paint peels in long, curling strips from the exterior walls, revealing layers of history beneath. Broken chandeliers hang from high ceilings inside, swaying slightly with the occasional draft, casting fractured light across dust-covered floors. At night, a red glow seems to emanate from within, pooling in windows and reflecting against cracked surfaces, hinting at life or memory lingering in the house. The entryway stretches wide, with heavy wooden doors and a grand staircase leading to upper floors. The air feels heavier, dense with the scent of aged wood and the faint tang of decay. Footsteps echo differently than expected, carrying an eerie resonance as if the walls themselves amplify sound. The space is silent, yet alive, filled with subtle movements that draw attention to every shadow and reflection. Figures appear on staircases and in hallways, sometimes clearly formed, other times half-shadows. They move with purpose, pausing to watch, or pointing toward spaces beyond immediate view. Their presence is never threatening, but commanding, drawing the eye and attention. Observers report a sense of being acknowledged, as if the house itself communicates through these apparitions, revealing fragments of past events preserved in the architecture. The red glow intensifies in certain rooms, spilling across floors and walls, creating a dramatic interplay of shadow and light. Movement within this illumination becomes mesmerizing, with figures appearing to glide along staircases or linger at doorways, their outlines shifting and blending with the environment. It catches on the edges of broken chandeliers, glinting from cracked mirrors, and deepening the sense of depth within long hallways. It catches on the edges of broken chandeliers, glinting from cracked mirrors, and deepening the sense of depth within long hallways. It catches on the edges of broken chandeliers, glinting from cracked mirrors, and deepening the sense of depth within long hallways. Walls lined with faded wallpaper contribute to the unsettling atmosphere. Some visitors report seeing faces form in the patterns, subtle at first, then more distinct with sustained observation. Eyes, mouths, and expressions seem to emerge from the designs, only to dissolve back into abstraction when attention wanders. This phenomenon heightens the sense that the house remembers, preserving images and impressions of those who once occupied its rooms. The grand staircase serves as the centerpiece of the house's interior. Visitors ascending or descending often feel a presence nearby. Footsteps echo in time or slightly ahead. The sound is never constant, appearing and fading unpredictably, reinforcing the sensation of movement within the empty space. Figures may linger midway on the staircase, watching silently or gesturing toward points beyond reach. Their forms framed against the red-tinged light. Crimson Hall's rooms tell stories through decay. Furniture is displaced, dust-coated, and worn, as though frozen mid-use. Curtains hang torn or tangled, catching drafts that ripple through the space. Every object seems purposeful, a fragment of life paused. Visitors notice small details, a door slightly ajar that was closed moments ago, a reflection in a mirror that does not correspond to their own movements, a faint creak from a distant floor. These elements collectively craft an environment where attention and observation become essential. The ceilings and corners harbor additional impressions. Broken chandeliers sway gently, shadows flickering across ceilings and walls. Light from windows interacts with these movements, projecting shapes and forms that shift unpredictably. Visitors often report moments where they feel observed from above, a sense of presence anchored in the upper levels, though nothing is physically visible. The interplay of red light, shadow, and the architecture creates a dynamic, immersive experience. Even the smallest rooms maintain a sense of awareness. Doorways and alcoves reveal subtle shifts in perception. The faint feeling of brushings along the skin. And sounds that do not originate from any source. The house seems attuned to those who move through it, responding to attention and motion with fleeting manifestations. Whether shadows, light shifts, or the subtle suggestion of figures. These cues guide perception, emphasizing the house's capacity to engage senses fully. Exiting Crimson Hall often leaves a lasting impression. The red glow, shifting shadows, figures on staircases, and faces in wallpaper linger in memory long after the doors are closed. Visitors recall the house's presence in detail, the echo of footsteps, the sway of chandeliers, the interplay of light and decay. It is a space that commands attention, preserving history, memory, and observation in every structural element. Crimson Hall is more than a decayed mansion. It is a repository of experience, an immersive environment where architecture, light, shadow, and memory converge. Figures on staircases, faces in walls, and the red glow of illumination engage sight, sound, and awareness simultaneously. Each visit becomes a deliberate exploration, a conscious interaction with the layers of history preserved in space. The mansion communicates subtly yet profoundly, ensuring that those who enter leave with a vivid, unforgettable impression of a place where the past endures visibly and viscerally. Silent Pines House sits deep within a dense forest, surrounded by towering pines that block wind and sound, creating a pocket of stillness. The trees rise like silent sentinels, their trunks dark and straight, needles forming a thick canopy overhead. Sunlight filters in thin shafts, falling in shifting patterns across the moss-covered ground and the weathered exterior of the house. Even from outside, the air feels heavier, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Approaching the house, one is struck by the quiet, as if the forest itself absorbs every sound before it reaches the building. Inside, the stillness becomes absolute. Sounds disappear, leaving only the faint echo of movement. Floors creak with careful steps, yet the air seems to swallow each footfall, intensifying awareness of every subtle noise. Visitors often report faint laughter drifting through the halls, soft and irregular, with no discernible source. The laughter is light yet unsettling, a presence without form, threading through corridors and rooms like a memory that refuses to dissipate. Shadows play a constant role in shaping perception. Light entering through tall windows fractures into slivers that cross walls and floors, shifting with the day and the sway of trees outside. Occasionally, shadows take on forms that suggest motion, subtly aligning into humanoid shapes that vanish when looked at directly. They linger just beyond the edge of vision, compelling attention while resisting understanding. Observers feel watched, though nothing material stands in their path. Lanterns within the house behave unpredictably. Some glow softly when no one is near, illuminating corners of rooms otherwise engulfed in darkness. The light flickers without wind, casting shadows that stretch and bend in unusual ways. Movement of the lanterns appears deliberate, as though responding to presence, yet no human hand is involved. These small illuminations heighten awareness of surroundings and lend a surreal quality to the otherwise empty spaces. The architecture of Silent Pines House contributes to its atmosphere. Narrow hallways twist between rooms, sometimes appearing longer than measured space allows. Ceilings arch and slope, creating subtle distortions in perspective. Rooms are furnished sparsely, with worn carpets, faded curtains, and furniture that retains the weight of past use. Small details, a tipped chair, an open drawer, a smudge of dust suggest movement without clear cause, inviting speculation while maintaining ambiguity. Temperature shifts add to the experience. Some rooms feel warmer or cooler than expected, as if the air itself carries the weight of unseen presence. Cold spots drift without pattern, moving through corridors or hovering near corners. The effect is subtle but persistent, creating heightened sensitivity and a sense of caution. Even the act of breathing becomes more conscious, each inhale and exhale measured against the awareness of space and its unseen occupants. Light and darkness interplay constantly. During the day, sunlight refracts through windows, creating patterns that dance across floors and walls. By night, shadows dominate, deepening textures, exaggerating angles, and amplifying perception of movement. The interplay invites attentiveness, compelling each visitor to notice subtleties that might otherwise go unnoticed. Every glance, every pause, becomes part of the dialogue between observer and environment. The forest outside amplifies isolation. Trees absorb sound, leaving the house in a bubble of quiet, where distant noises are muffled or absent entirely. Even during wind or rain, the interior remains subdued, as though insulated from the outside world. This separation enhances the house's character, creating a space where ordinary cues of time, distance, and direction shift, demanding focus and presence. Visitors describe a gradual sense. Each step, glance, and sound contributes. And lantern light combine with architectural cues and sensory detail to form a continuous experience that is both immersive and subtle. Memory of Silent Pine's house lingers long after leaving. The faint laughter, drifting shadows, and shifting lanterns remain vivid in recollection. The stillness and subtle energy imprint on perception, coloring quiet moments and influencing attention in unrelated spaces. The house leaves an enduring impression, a mixture of curiosity, respect, and cautious fascination that persists over time. Silent Pine's house endures in patient quiet, a structure shaped by history, architecture, and atmosphere. Its walls, floors, and corridors hold layers of sensory memory, both tangible and intangible. Visitors engage with a space that is simultaneously solid and elusive, its presence felt in air, shadow, and perception. Each crossing, glance, and movement becomes part of the ongoing narrative of the house, offering immersive experience, reflection, and an intimate encounter with subtle, persistent energy that defines this enigmatic forest dwelling. Ravencliff Estate sprawls across a hilltop, its grandeur faded into ruin. Ivy climbs the walls in thick tangles, curling around broken windows and crumbling stone. Rooflines sag where shingles have fallen, and chimneys lean as though weighed down by time. The surrounding gardens are overgrown, weeds curling through cracks in pathways and around abandoned fountains. Even from a distance, the estate exudes a weight, a presence that seems aware of every approach, every movement across the grounds. Inside, the air is heavy with the scent of damp wood, aged plaster, and the faint hint of smoke long extinguished. Faded wallpaper peels in sheets, revealing plaster scarred by time and neglect. Dust motes drift lazily in shafts of light filtering through broken windows, moving slowly as though suspended in the heavy stillness. Visitors often report cold spots, sudden drops in temperature that seem to move with them through the estate. The chill presses into skin and clothing, a subtle weight that intensifies attention. In these moments, the estate feels alive, responding to presence with quiet awareness. Whispers occasionally rise from the corners of corridors, asking for help, soft and insistent, filling the halls with a sense of longing and urgency. They come from no visible source, fading as quickly as they appear, leaving only a lingering resonance in the mind. Figures in early 20th century clothing are sometimes seen moving through the rooms and hallways. Their movements are deliberate yet slow, gliding as if aware of the world but not fully part of it. Approaching them often causes them to vanish, leaving behind an echo of motion and the faint scent of perfume or cigar smoke. Observers report that these figures are never threatening, only present, a reminder of a time long past and preserved in the very walls of Ravencliff Estate. Shadows behave unusually throughout the estate. Glowing eyes are occasionally glimpsed in the darkness, peering from alcoves, stairwells, or broken furniture. The eyes do not follow directly but appear and vanish in fleeting moments, leaving a sense of being watched from multiple points at once. The effect is subtle but pervasive, heightening the sense that the estate is more than its physical structure. The grand halls and staircases amplify every sound. Creaks of wood, distant rustling, and the faint sigh of wind through broken windows become magnified, echoing across spaces that were once filled with life. Conversation spoken aloud in one room can drift down hallways to another, carried by the resonance of empty walls. The estate seems to hold memory in its surfaces, amplifying presence and creating an atmosphere of both beauty and unease. The bedrooms and private chambers retain details of life long abandoned. Furniture is overturned or coated in dust, mirrors cracked but still reflecting dim light in distorted patterns. Sheets of lace or fabric hang from closets, moving slightly as if brushed by unseen fingers. Visitors report the feeling of being guided through these spaces, subtle nudges or pressures that steer motion without force. A sensation that the estate wishes to be acknowledged or explored in certain ways. The exterior contributes equally to the experience. Shadows stretch across gardens and walls, changing with light and time. The estate appears larger than it is, corridors seem longer. And distances between rooms shift subtly with perspective. Every approach, every glance, reinforces the sense that Ravencliff Estate exists slightly apart from the normal flow of time. Visitors frequently leave with lasting impressions. Cold spots, whispers, fleeting figures, and glowing eyes imprint themselves on memory. Replayed in dreams or sudden recollections. The estatea's presence lingers beyond physical departure. Felt in quiet moments or when viewing photographs taken on site. The memory of hallways, shadows, and unseen observation remains vivid. A reminder that the estatea's story extends beyond mere history into the realm of lived perception. Ravencliff Estate endures atop its hill, abandoned yet full of presence, decay and memory intertwined. Its hallways, broken windows, and sprawling rooms carry echoes of lives long past, while figures, shadows, and whispers persist in the present. To walk its corridors, observe its rooms, and feel the subtle guidance of unseen hands is to step into a space where history, perception, and subtle energy converge. The estate is more than wood, stone, and glass. It is a living record of presence, memory, and observation, leaving every visitor changed, aware, and marked by the silent weight of its continuing existence. Hollow Ridge Cabin sits deep within the forest, isolated among towering pines and thick undergrowth. Its wooden walls are weathered and gray, the roof sagging in places, and windows cracked or missing altogether. A narrow trail leads to the cabin, winding through shadowed trees and fallen leaves, easily lost in the dim light of evening. By day, it seems quiet and abandoned, a relic left to the slow reclamation of the forest. By night, however, the cabin transforms, taking on a presence that is both subtle and unmistakable, as if the structure itself is alive. Figures sometimes appear in the windows, motionless and staring outward into the darkness. Their forms are vague, but distinctly human, frozen in the frames of glass that have long forgotten the warmth of firelight. They do not move or react to those who approach, yet the feeling of being watched is undeniable. Visitors who pause on the trail feel a quiet pressure, as if the cabin is aware of their presence, observing from its shadowed interior. Fog often rolls in around the foundation, appearing suddenly and moving unnaturally. The fog hugs the walls and creeps along the ground, obscuring the path and softening the sound of footsteps. Travelers describe it as heavier than ordinary mist, lingering in shapes and swirls that suggest movement just beyond perception. The fog seems to deepen the shadows around the cabin, making the windows and doorways appear even darker, as though drawing attention to the shapes within. Inside the cabin, floors creak beneath weight that seems invisible. Visitors report hearing the sound of chains dragging along the wooden planks, low and deliberate, echoing across empty rooms. The noise rises and falls unpredictably, never consistent, as if an unseen presence moves methodically through the structure. Even when the cabin is explored carefully, no source for the sound is ever found. The effect is disorienting, leaving a subtle but persistent impression of being accompanied. The interior carries the smell of aged wood, dampness, and decay. Broken furniture rests against walls. Dust covers surfaces unevenly. And cobwebs stretch between beams. Shadows stretch across corners and crevices. Distorted by gaps in the roof and the irregular light filtering through windows. The combination of creaking boards, dragging chains, and rolling fog creates an immersive sense of presence that feels almost intentional. A subtle choreography of movement and sound without visible cause. Travelers approaching at dusk often notice the interplay of fog and shadow first. Shapes seem to move at the edges of vision, and the forest beyond the clearing becomes muted, muffling distant sounds. Footsteps along the trail echo strangely, reinforcing the sensation that the cabin is not entirely alone. Those who linger report heightened awareness of every small detail, from the tilt of a broken door to the flicker of a shadow against a wall, each element contributing to a continuous sense of observation. Windows are the most unsettling part of Hollow Ridge Cabin. Figures appear and vanish with no warning, standing perfectly still one moment and gone the next. The impression is of life frozen in place, a memory embedded into the structure that plays repeatedly for anyone who watches. Observers often feel compelled to look away, yet cannot resist turning back, drawn by the sense of something waiting, patient and silent. The forest itself amplifies the experience. Trees close in around the cabin, creating long corridors of darkness. Wind moves through branches, producing strange echoes that blend with the sound of chains or distant footsteps. Even on still nights, ambient noises seem to carry, reflecting and refracting from walls, boards, and leaves. Travelers feel isolated, as if the cabin and the forest together form a controlled environment where perception is heightened and ordinary sensations take on extraordinary significance. Time feels altered near the cabin. Moments stretch and compress. And the rhythm of creaking floors and dragging chains seems measured independently of human movement. Some visitors describe stepping inside and feeling minutes extend into longer intervals. With shadows shifting slowly and fog swirling deliberately. The experience is immersive, a subtle tension that persists even after leaving the clearing. Hollow Ridge Cabin preserves an atmosphere that is both quiet and insistent. Figures in windows, rolling fog, dragging chains, and shifting shadows form a consistent pattern across accounts, creating an experience that is difficult to dismiss. The structure does not pursue or attack, yet it commands attention, embedding memory and perception in ways that linger long after departure. Visitors carry with them the faint sensation of being observed, footsteps echoing in imagination, and the pull of fog that moves against expectation. At night, the cabin is most alive. Shadows stretch unnaturally along walls, figures appear briefly in the windows, and fog rolls silently across the ground. Chains drag without source, echoing through empty rooms and hallways. Every creak of the floorboards, every glance at a corner, and every swirl of mist contributes to a subtle narrative, one that blends memory, presence, and environment. Hollow Ridge Cabin remains a place where the ordinary and the unexplainable converge, a space of quiet observation and lingering impression that endures long after visitors leave. Stormwatch House sits atop a windswept hill, its silhouette outlined against the sky, commanding a view of the surrounding valley. The structure is sturdy yet aged, its stone and timber showing signs of decades of exposure to wind, rain, and lightning. Even in calm weather, the house seems to hold an unusual presence, but during storms, its character transforms, as if responding to the fury of nature. Its silhouette changes, reflecting the turmoil of the storm, as if it's alive. Lightning strikes illuminate the hill in sudden, blinding flashes. In those brief bursts of light, figures are sometimes seen silhouetted against windows and along the roofline. They remain visible only for a moment, their outlines sharp yet intangible, vanishing with the next flash. Visitors describe a sense of being watched, as though the house itself is observing their presence and responding in kind. Doors slam violently without cause, echoing through hallways and across floors. The sound is startling, reverberating throughout the structure, yet when explored, no drafts, wind, or mechanical issues explain the force. These incidents are unpredictable, often occurring in tandem with lightning flashes, making the house feel alive, reactive to both the storm outside and the occupants within. Shapes move across the rooftops during heavy rain and gusting wind. Observers report silhouettes darting along eaves and gables, moving swiftly and silently. The combination of darkness, rain, and sudden light from lightning strikes creates an eerie sense of motion that is difficult to ignore. Even when no figure is visible, a lingering impression remains, as though the house itself has enacted movement to draw attention. Inside, the atmosphere is charged. The scent of ozone mixes with the dampness from rain seeping through aged rooflines. Shadows stretch along corridors, flickering with the shifting light. Rooms that appear ordinary in daylight become unpredictable, corners darken abruptly. And familiar furnishings seem subtly altered, as though the storm amplifies perception and heightens awareness of the house's nuances. Stormwatch House is known for its responsiveness to weather. Wind howls through gaps in windows and under doors, producing low moans that echo like whispers through hallways. Electrical surges during lightning strikes cause lights to flicker, sometimes illuminating spaces partially or casting moving shadows that do not match the environment. Footsteps echo on the creaking floors, sometimes synchronous with lightning flashes, sometimes independent. Guests report hearing movement upstairs or along hallways when no one is present. The sound of steps, combined with doors slamming and flickering lights, creates a layered auditory experience that engages the imagination and intensifies tension. Each storm amplifies these effects, making the house feel like an active participant rather than a passive structure. Even in rooms distant from windows, the energy of the storm is palpable. Lightning and thunder serve as both illumination and punctuation, drawing attention to fleeting movement and subtle changes in the environment. The sensation is immersive, leaving occupants on heightened alert for every sound, shadow, and gust of wind. Stormwatch House's exterior contributes to the effect. The hill amplifies wind, and trees surrounding the property sway violently, their branches scraping against walls and windows. Rain pounds roofs and decks with unpredictable rhythm. The combined force of natural elements interacts with the building's architecture to create an environment that feels both reactive and alive. Visitors report moments when the house seems to pulse with the storm, a living extension of the weather itself. Time behaves differently within the house during storms. Seconds stretch and moments feel suspended, especially when figures are glimpsed on rooftops or silhouetted in windows. Seconds stretch and moments feel suspended, especially when figures are glimpsed on rooftops or silhouetted in windows. Shadows linger, echoing movement long after it has ceased, and the interplay of light and darkness enhances the sensation that the house itself possesses awareness. Shadows linger, echoing movement long after it has ceased, and the interplay of light and darkness enhances the sensation that the house itself possesses awareness. Even when the storm passes, memories of motion, sound, and presence remain vivid. Even when the storm passes, memories of motion, sound, and presence remain vivid. Guests often describe a mixture of awe and unease. The beauty of lightning arcing across the valley contrasts with the house's unsettling responses. Slamming doors, moving shapes, and whispered echoes that seem to follow footsteps. The environment is both magnificent and intimidating, drawing attention to the power of nature, while reminding visitors that the house is more than a passive witness. By dawn, Stormwatch House returns to a quieter state. Rooflines glisten with rain. Wind diminishes, and shadows shorten as sunlight reaches the hilltop. The evidence of nighttime activity lingers. in the lingering chill of the air, and in the subtle displacement of objects. Visitors often feel the energy of the house has receded, but remains, quietly waiting for the next storm to awaken it once more. Stormwatch House endures as a place where architecture, weather, and perception intersect. Figures on rooftops, doors slamming, and fleeting silhouettes combine with natural phenomena to create an experience that is immersive, tense, and unforgettable. Phantom Valley House sits quietly near a dry creek, its walls weathered and paint long faded, a relic abandoned for decades. From a distance, it appears still and lifeless, its windows dark, roof sagging in places, and surrounding vegetation reclaiming the property with creeping vines and tall grasses. Yet as visitors approach, the house seems to assert a presence that is impossible to ignore, a subtle tension woven into every corner of its structure and grounds. The first sign of activity often comes in glimpses. Figures appear at windows and doorways, their forms faint and shifting, vanishing when observers look directly. They linger for moments, as if observing, then fade back into shadow. The experience is fleeting, leaving a sense of movement and awareness. An impression that the house remembers and responds, preserving fragments of past inhabitants or moments long gone. Voices are another element of the Estetia's presence. Visitors report hearing their names called softly, echoing from within the walls or along the dry creek below. The sounds are clear, intimate, yet impossible to locate. Each call draws attention, pulling listeners toward hallways or open spaces, only for the sound to fade before any source is revealed. The effect is immersive, creating a heightened awareness of both space and self, as if the house itself is attuned to those who move through it. Inside, the structure amplifies the sense of unease. Floors creak underfoot. Doors shift slightly on their hinges, and corners seem to stretch beyond expectation. Some visitors swear that the house subtly shifts when unobserved, walls seeming to breathe, staircases altering their alignment, and furniture appearing in slightly different positions upon return. These movements are never abrupt but persistent enough to reinforce the sense that the building itself is a living entity, responsive and aware. The dry creek adds an additional dimension. Its bed, cracked and scattered with stones, reflects the faint light of the sky, creating patterns that move with the wind. Shadows from nearby trees stretch across the property, intersecting with the house to form shapes that appear momentarily human before dissolving into abstraction. The interaction of light, shadow, and structure deepens the sense of presence, drawing attention to every subtle change in the environment. Rooms within Phantom Valley House are layered with history. Dust settles on surfaces, cobwebs stretch across corners, and remnants of furniture hint at domestic routines long abandoned. Visitors notice subtle movements, curtains that sway without wind, reflections in glass that do not match their own, or objects that shift position slightly. These occurrences are never overtly threatening, but they cultivate a deep awareness, a constant sense that the house watches and responds. This cultivates a deep awareness, a constant sense that the house watches and responds. Windows and doorways frame these experiences. Figures appear at the edges of vision, occasionally moving toward the interior or pausing to observe. Their presence is deliberate and measured, a quiet reminder that the house preserves and communicates memory. Observers often feel the need to pause, to respect the space and the history it carries, understanding that every glance and movement is part of an immersive dialogue with the environment. Understanding that every glance and movement is part of an immersive dialogue with the environment. The architecture itself contributes to perception. Narrow hallways, tall ceilings, and uneven floors create angles and shadows that distort distance and perspective. Each room holds unique acoustic properties, amplifying whispers, footsteps, and creaks in unexpected ways. The house's dimensions encourage attention, making even small sounds or subtle shifts feel significant. Every step becomes a conscious act, every glance a measure of awareness within a space that seems both vast and intimate. Time within Phantom Valley House seems altered. Moments stretch, silence grows dense, and perception heightens. Visitors report that sounds, shadows, and figures appear more vivid in twilight or under overcast skies. When natural light is muted. The combination of structural decay, environmental elements, and perceptual cues creates an immersive experience, where the ordinary and extraordinary merge seamlessly, shaping attention and emotional response. Exiting the house does not immediately erase the impressions it leaves. The dry creak, the windows, and the subtle shifts in the building continue to resonate in memory. Names called in whispers, fleeting figures, and the sensation of walls breathing linger, reminding visitors of the depth of presence within the space. Even from a distance, the property exerts a quiet influence, an enduring awareness that maintains its effect long after departure. Ultimately, Phantom Valley House is more than an abandoned home. It is a repository of memory, perception, and subtle communication. Figures at windows, echoes of voices, and the house's shifting architecture create an immersive environment, engaging sight, sound, and instinct. Visitors experience heightened attention, reflection, and awareness, encountering a space where history persists tangibly and invisibly. Every visit becomes an exploration of presence, memory, and perception, leaving a lasting impression of a house that lives quietly, attentively, and endlessly along the dry creek. Thank you for exploring the haunted abandoned houses of Michigan with me tonight. These homes carry the weight of history, tragedy, and restless spirits. Some visitors leave shaken, some haunted, and some never return. Listen carefully, step lightly, and ask yourself, would you dare enter a house where the past refuses to rest? Or would you turn away before the shadows reach you? Rest well, my friend, until our next haunted journey.